is where the Israelites make a really, really, really bad choice, and the fallout is very great. And then we're going to end up with a good section of time or a good section of text rather, in the plains of Moab, exploring what happens just before Israel enters the Promised Land. So let's get started. At the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses numbers the people of Israel. That's where we get the name Numbers from. For this book, he takes a census, and he sets up the camp in this formation. This formation is really important because as far as the ancient Israelites were concerned, they placed God at the center of their camp, and then and of course God inhabited that tabernacle that for Levites, and then surrounding the Levites were the rest of the tribes of Israel. So we see this structure set up, and God's roles are made pretty clear. God's providing shelter when Israel's on the move. He appears in the form of this fiery cloud, and his role is their protector and guide. And so it's a good setup. You have this really, really powerful divine being that's going to be in this land, and it's supposed to be great. But they'll complain. And the people aren't the only ones who complain. The other leaders in the tribe of Levi start to complain about Moses too. Moses' own brother and sister question whether or not Moses is the legitimate sole person that God is leading Israel through. And that doesn't work out too well for them because God punishes the people who complain. There's a plague that breaks out in Israel through some food, and also Miriam contracts leprosy. It's really, really not that great to complain against Moses or God. And after that really brief interlude, we find ourselves in this place called Paran. And right as they get here, Moses sends spies to go and see what is this promised land like. And they come back and they say the land is really good, but the current inhabitants are super strong. We're not going to be able to take them in battle. Or at least that's what most of the spies say. 10 of the spies say, we can't do this. 2 of the spies have faith that God will be good to his word and be their protector and guide and help them conquer this land. But the rest of Israel sides with the 10 spies. They rebel. They plan to kill Moses and Aaron and go back to Egypt, cut their losses. And God says, okay, well, I'm going to give you what you want. You're not going to enter the promised land, but God has already rescued this nation from Egypt. So rather than allow this generation to forfeit the promised land and take their children back into slavery, God says, you're going to die out in the wilderness, and then your children will have the choice of inhabiting the promised land. That didn't bring back a bad report on the land, which is really good for them. So we see God not just judging people who don't listen to him or don't believe in him, and believe that he's going to make good on his word, but we see him sparing not just the ones who do, but also future generations so that they can make their choice as well. So he's giving people honors their poor decisions. Also in Paran, we have another problem with a rebellion. So we've already seen the people of Israel rebel as a whole. Then we see some of the other Levites rebelling against Moses and Aaron. And they say, we don't want it's a pretty gnarly story. But not all the people of Korah's family die out. Some of the sons of Korah survive, and in fact, some of the descendants of this rebel actually continue loyal to him, so that they can make their own decisions as well. We kind of have this parallelism. People and then he gives them new laws for in which now we see the entire generation of Israel die off. The idea is that almost everyone that got numbered at the beginning will not be alive by the end of Numbers. So it's kind of a sad one. In our traveling interlude over here in chapters 20 and 20 earlier, Israel complains, a plague breaks out. Aaron and really sad. But we see God not only of the whole nation, which finding ways to be faithful to those agreements with great zeal. It's a pretty nice ray of the nation. Not on the plains of Moab, we see some of Israel's enemies hiring, or at least his donkey, which actually has a few lines in this story. But the big idea is that Balaam is a prophet for hire, and so Israel's enemies hire him to curse Israel, and Balaam goes along with it. But the problem is that, or at least the problem for Balaam, is that although Balaam announced blessings on Israel, so even though God has been dealing with people who are really disloyal to him and didn't promise land the first time, he is still fighting for them from afar, and the other nations and their gods at bay, so that he can make good on his promises to the nation of Israel and their ancestors. And then, right before we head into the book of Deuteronomy, and right before Israel heads into the Promised Land, we start seeing some more things coming together, just sort of starting to wrap up the books of Moses. So we have some more laws. Moses knows he's not going to make it into the Promised Land, so Joshua is named as his successor. Joshua, you'll remember, is one of the spies who brought back a good report on the land of Canaan. 2.5 tribes of Israel say, we really like this land on the east side of the Jordan River where we already are. Can we just settle here? And Moses says, yeah, that's okay, just so long as you're loyal and supportive to the tribes that cross over to occupy the land of Canaan. And so we're already seeing God making good on some of his promises of giving land to the people of Israel at the end of the book. And that is where the book of Numbers ends. So as you can see, there is a lot going on in Numbers, and this is a very, very condensed video, but to the Bible, because we see community to take God at his word, or to make up their own rules and try to do things their own way. And when a choice of entering the Promised Land, they didn't choose to. God found a way to so provide an opportunity for an entirely new generation to make their own decision. It's a marvelous look at how, with the nation of Israel through the rest of the Old Testament. Because we're going to see this motif of generations make how they're going to obey. That way I can notify you as soon as the next video goes live. Bible stories in it. Most of the book of Numbers doesn't get a lot of attention from Christians or Bible readers very much these days. Oh. And why is it important to understanding the rest of it? Pray with Overview Bible, and right now we're going to get the big picture. If you have a good understanding of Numbers, you're going to have a much easier time understanding the rest of the Old Testament and the rest of the Bible. That's in the book of Genesis, that's the first book, we see the ancient origins of this people group that comes to be known as Israel. In the book of Exodus, Israel's God rescues them from slavery in Egypt. You've probably heard this story. And he pulls them out into the wilderness to this mountain called Mount Sinai, where he makes a very special agreement with them. He says, "You're going to be my people, I'm going to be your God, because I rescued you from the people and the gods of Egypt." And then in the book of Leviticus, we start to understand more of the regulations that the people of Israel believed they had to follow in order to maintain that proximity to their God. And then the book of Numbers picks up right where Exodus and Leviticus left off. They're still at the foot of that mountain where God has made this really special agreement called a covenant with the people of Israel. And what Numbers does is it's going to take us from this mountain outside of Egypt all the way to the plains of Moab, land just across the Jordan River from the promised land of a road trip. And the second is the families, and one particular tribe was and they served they half of Israel as priests. They offered sacrifices, the tabernacle. Moses, and who was, while we're looking to go between major sections, and except right in the book of Genesis, that's the first book, we see the ancient rescues the story, and he pulls them, he makes a very special agreement, because I rescued you, in that this really special agreement called. What Numbers does is it's going to take us from this mountain outside of Egypt all the way this patch of land just across the Jordan River from the promised land that the Israelites hoped to inhabit. The sad news is it's not that great of a road trip, and we're going to get an idea of how this goes. As we're looking through the book of Numbers, we're three different parties. One is just the entire nation. The second group of Israel divided itself into 12 groups of families. They maintained who was the prophet who was leading these people, and Aaron, who was the high priest. They both came from this tribe of Levi. The people that, of course, the third party that we're going to keep an eye on is God himself, and see what he's doing through this story. Now, Numbers follow the promised land, and called Paran, and or Paran, and Moab, exploring what happens just formation. This formation is really important. Or the rest of the tribes of Israel. So we see this structure set up, and God form of this fiery cloud, and his role is their protector and guide. And the wilderness into the promised land, and it's supposed to be great. People of Israel complain. Miriam contracts leprosy. It's really contracts leprosy. It's really not that great to complain against Moses. Ourselves in this place called Paran. And right as they get here, Moses sends spies to go and see, what is this promised land like? What is this promised land like? And they come back and they say the land is really good. We're not going to be able to, we can't do this. Two of the spies and help them conquer this land. Kill Moses and Aaron and go back to Egypt. This nation from Egypt to forfeit the promised land and take their children back into slavery to die. Really. And then afterward, we get some laws for and Caleb, the two spies, that for them. So we see God people who don't listen to him or don't believe that he's going to make good on his word. But we see him sparing not just the ones who do, but also the future poor decisions. Only Aaron's family should have this. Too. And so there's this, and in Moses and Aaron, and it's super. So laws for living in the land. We have some of the Levites, his leaders, and got numbered at the beginning will not be. In our traveling interlude over here in chapter 9, and then also Moses will die too. Moses in front of all the people, and God says, not only judging those who disobey him, and he fights on behalf of the people of Israel. So which is really, really interesting, because what we see through this book of made those agreements with, very fascinating portrait. So it's very, very interesting, and one of the reasons why section we are in the plains of Moab, so in their promised land. And when and this is the in the next book of Deuteronomy, Aaron's grandson of God. These are like as priests in the new land, because Phinehas half of his God. And so when we're looking at the story of Levi, because although they were in God, we've seen them turning on Phinehas, and Phinehas is on board with God and his. Meanwhile, not on the plains of Moab, we see some of Israel this prophet named Balaam. And you've probably heard about Balaam, or at least his donkey, which actually has a few lines in this story. But the big, so Israel's enemies hire him to curse Israel. And Balaam goes along. So dealing with people who are really disloyal to him and didn't count on enter the promised land the first time, he is still providing for them and their gods at bay. Right before we head into the book of Deuteronomy, and start seeing the book of Deuteronomy, and start seeing some more things coming together, just sort of starting to wrap up the books of Moses. So we have some more laws. Moses knows he's not going to make it into the promised land, so Joshua is named as his successor. Joshua, you'll remember, is one of the 2.5 tribes of Israel on the east side of the Jordan River, where we already are. Can we just settle here? And Moses says, yeah, that's okay, just along cross over to occupy the land of Canaan. And so we're already seeing God making to take God at his word, or but those that were will obey and remain loyal or theirs. So that's what the book of Numbers with Overview Bible. And right now I'm understanding the rest of the Old Testament. In the book of Genesis, that's the first book, we see the ancient origins of slavery in Egypt. You've probably heard this story. And in order to maintain the foot of that mountain, is it's going to take us this patch of land the Israelites says it's not that great of a road trip. How this goes. Of Israel, everybody. The second is called the Levites. Israel divided groups of families, and one particular tribe was they served Israel's God on they maintained Moses and keep an eye on the people that go between the whole nation and God himself, and see what he's doing through this story. Now, nothing at Mount Sinai before they take off to stop in the middle with a really big section in this place called Paran. And really bad choice, and the fallout of time in or a good section of text rather in the plains of Moab, exploring what happens just before Israel enters the promised land. So let's get started. At the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses numbers the people of Israel. That's where we get the name Numbers from. For this book, he takes a census. And he sets up the camp in this formation. This formation is really important because that portable temple, and then the Levites were the rest of the tribes of Israel. So we see clear of this fiery. It's a good setup. You have this from the wilderness into the promised land, and it's supposed to be great. But when they start off on that journey, things go sour pretty quickly. The people of Israel complain. And the people aren't the only ones who complain. The other leader, Levi, starts to complain about Moses too. Moses' own brother and sole person that God is leading Israel through. Say we can't do this. Two of the spies have faith that God will be good to his word and be a protector and guide and